It's early morning in Hiroshima Prefecture, Japan. Only a few people are awake yet, as the sun has not yet risen above the mountains. But we are on a train, heading to a very special place. Our first stop is a coastal area called Tadanoumi. It's just a quiet fishing village, not much different from many other places in Japan. It has the same problems of an aging, shrinking population that afflict almost all of rural Japan. No, it is not this place, peaceful though it is, that we have come to see. Tadanoumi is just the launching point. The ferry boat appears from the sea, and then it draws nearer and nearer. Soon it lands and begins to disgorge its contents. People from the islands have come to Japan's main island with their cars. They are probably heading to their places of work. We board the ferry before it leaves, and then head out at a steady pace toward the seas beyond. The Seto Inland Sea is sometimes called Japan's Mediterranean Sea because of its scenic views and many small islands. Indeed, it is also a major waterway through which an enormous amount of shipping travels up from China and Southeast Asia to eager markets in Osaka, Tokyo, and elsewhere. But our ferry is heading to neither Osaka nor Tokyo, nor anywhere so grand, but only to a modest island that takes less than an hour to walk from one end to the other. Its most prominent feature is the giant electricity pylon that crowns it, which is part of the Chushi power line crossing, the tallest of their kind in all of Japan. Now we are approaching the coast, eagerly waiting to land on this little island that has drawn us from so far away to visit. The Japanese name for this island is Okunoshima. And here is the Okunoshima Welcoming Committee. They are rabbits, lots and lots of rabbits, who come running up to visitors to beg for food or just to fool around. They are wild rabbits, but are so accustomed to human beings that they act almost like house pets. And you won't be surprised to hear, will you, that Okunoshima is also sometimes called Usagi-jima, which means Rabbit Island in Japanese. No one knows exactly how many rabbits live on Rabbit Island. 300 seems like too conservative an estimate. But you can hardly walk 100 yards in any direction in the wintertime, when natural food is more scarce, without being confronted by a begging rabbit, or two, or four. But few of the Japanese people here seem to mind. In fact, it is these little rabbits themselves who have put Okunoshima on the map, so to speak. The number of Japanese tourists we found here were not so many as to reduce the island's attraction, but clearly the island would have few visitors indeed were it not for these charming, cuddly creatures. The rabbits of Okunoshima are impossible not to like. The rabbits themselves seem to have a pretty good life on Okunoshima. They all looked healthy and well fed. All of their natural predators seem to have been removed from this little island. So what could possibly be wrong on this island paradise? Is it for the rabbits alone that we have traveled so many miles? In fact, there is very little amiss on Okunoshima today. But in the not-so-distant past, this tiny island in the Seto Inland Sea was not the paradise that it is today, but rather one of the darkest, most horrible corners of Japan, and indeed of the entire world. They have been left very much as they stood in 1945, when the Japanese nation was shattered in the defeat of war. No one lives here now but the ghosts of a darker age. This too is Okunoshima, today's happy land of playful rabbits. This stone pier was once used to land people and goods from the main island. But the Japanese Imperial Army stopped using it and built a new pier because it could be seen clearly by the residents of the opposite coast. You see, Okunoshima was at one time a closely guarded military secret. That means that not only were all of the activities on the island a top secret, but even the very existence of the island was considered secret. Trains that passed near the island were even required to block their passengers' view of the seaside to preserve its anonymity. That policy extended so far that this little island was erased from all official maps of Japan, eliminated from Japanese geography. What made Okunoshima such a sensitive place is that it was the Japanese Imperial Army's most important facility for the research, development, and production of poison gases to be used on the battlefields of China. Here are the laboratories where the poison gases were developed. These facilities on Okunoshima were first built by the Japanese Imperial Army in 1929, and they focused on the production of various kinds of mustard gas, the same blistering agents that were first used in Europe during World War I. Japan employed mustard gases against Chinese forces from 1937 until the end of the war in 1945. Okunoshima was the main factory for the development of these horrible gases, reaching a production capacity of about 1,500 tons at its peak, and in fact producing over 6,600 tons during the lifetime of the facility. After the war, U.S. forces occupied this former base of the Japanese Imperial Army and supervised the destruction of all of the poison gas-related facilities, which was in fact all of the human habitation that had existed on this island in 1945. At its peak, the number of military men and factory workers on Okunoshima reached about 5,000. But as the local museum and other sources make clear, the victims of Okunoshima gases were not confined to the Chinese they were employed against in war, but also many Japanese citizens as well. Many of the factory workers were exposed to the mustard gas through accidents, and because the protective clothing they possessed at that time was insufficient to fully insulate them from the danger. Moreover, long after the war had ended, the former workers suffered a variety of illnesses, in numbers that went far beyond that of the general population. Many Japanese who worked under brutal conditions on Okunoshima in wartime spent the rest of their lives suffering from the physical consequences of that grim experience. In most of Japan, the traces of the Pacific War have long been erased by development and by the general Japanese desire to bury unwelcome memories of the past. But here on Okunoshima, the ruins have been preserved. Here is the power station that provided all of the energy for the poison gas facilities. And here is a once camouflaged storehouse where mustard gas was kept. And here is a gun battery from which army sentries once stayed alert against unauthorized intruders. But today, it is all for the rabbits. One legend says that the rabbits of Okunoshima are the descendants of those which were once used for experiments in the poison gas laboratories. If so, the rabbits themselves have a direct connection not only to Okunoshima's charming present, but also to its dark past.